wherever you're listening or whether you're watching in the world, to what I hope and believe is going to be very useful, powerful information, and hopefully not just informative, but actually hopefully a pleasant experience as well. So I'm Jonathan Butler, and I am joined tonight by two of my colleagues, esteemed colleagues, Dr Rick Norris and Glyn Morris. And they'll probably be a bit embarrassed by me saying this, but both of these gentlemen are two of the leading psychologists in the UK. Dr Rick Norris is a consultant psychologist working within a large NHS trust, also works extensively in the private sector, working for a number of large companies, helping staff in various ways to improve performance and deal with mental health issues at work, and the author of a long list of books, including Think Yourself Happy. And Think Yourself Happy is, we're going to use quite a lot of the techniques and information from that book in this webinar tonight, but Rick will tell you more about that. And sitting alongside it at a safe distance, they've measured it out of 2 meters, is Glyn Morris. Now, Glyn, again, one of the UK's leading psychologists. And
Psychotherapist, John.
Psychotherapist, I apologise. I apologise for underselling you.
No, not at all, no.
And Glyn specialises in working in occupational health, which really means working with companies and their employees to address mental health issues in the workplace. So Glyn, again, is a very acclaimed speaker, authored and co-authored a number of articles, and has spoken extensively in the media, on radio, etc. So gentlemen who, between them, again, they probably won't thank me for saying this, but with over 60 years of experience. So we really have two experts here tonight with us. And we're here because we are clearly in the middle of a crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, global pandemic. And I think everybody, apart from the president of Brazil, has actually recognized that we are in a pandemic and the issues that exist. And clearly this is a very serious issue and a very difficult time for people. So very difficult in terms of concerns about our well-being of our family, friends, particularly anybody who might be, particularly vulnerable, but also for the wider economic impact of it as well. And of course, the uncertainty of this all, which is a difficult thing, which we'll touch on, I know tonight. But really, alongside of that, the actual COVID-19 pandemic, we have this twin pandemic, as you guys talk about, this twin pandemic of the fear and anxiety that surrounds COVID-19. And actually, for many people, the threat of this fear and anxiety pandemic is probably as big, if not bigger, than COVID-19 itself, because yes, it's having a huge impact upon us. So it's a very, very difficult time. So we are going to talk tonight about two things. We are going to talk about how your mind works. So a very simple layman's overview of how your mind works, because when you understand that, things will make a lot more sense about how you might be feeling right now. So we think that's going to be a really useful thing for you. So we're going to explain that to you. And I think you'll find that quite interesting and entertaining as well. And after that, and perhaps most importantly, we're going to go through some very practical techniques that are well proven in the best-selling book, Think Yourself Happy. We haven't got time to go through all of those, but we're going to go through some of the key points. And obviously, there's the opportunity to look at the book if you want to learn more about that. So I'm Jonathan Butler, and I run My Fit Mind. And My Fit Mind, I am a therapist working with hypnotherapy and something called rapid transformational therapy, which is about helping people change how they think about things to develop confidence and overcome anxiety. So I'm your host for this evening, and Glyn and Rick are the experts who I'm going to grill and put under the spotlight. So thank you very much for being here, gents, tonight. And perhaps I could hand over to you, Rick, if you could just maybe give a context about the 6 steps, the methodology, and what we're going to cover tonight. That would be really helpful.
Absolutely, John. I think we've got a slide to help people with this. Essentially, there are 6 steps in the book, and the reality is we're going to focus on probably about 3 or 4 at most tonight. So the main ones that we'll be looking at really is about, first of all, understanding why we are the way we are, which is a natural tendency towards threat sensitivity. Then we're going to understand, as you mentioned earlier, how our mind actually works. And then finally, we're going to move into some techniques, which we'll go into a little bit more detail before just summing up towards the end about, well, what about the future? A little bit about what happens when we all come out of this, which of course we will do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how we'll be taking it tonight, John. Okay,
that's great. And of course, that is a very important thing, isn't it, Rick, that we'll touch on about that we will come out of this, and that keeping that eye on the future is incredibly important.
It is, John. It's very important, and we'll be talking about how we can rationalise some of the real fear and the catastrophizing, and we'll be explaining these phrases later on in the webcast, John.
Fantastic, Rick. Thank you. So, as we say, obviously, for sure everybody listening to this is very familiar with the COVID-19 pandemic and what that means to them. But you talk about this twin pandemic of anxiety and fear. Could you explain what you mean by that and why we're facing that?
Yeah, essentially, John, what you have to do is you have to look at the fact that we are hardwired as human beings for threat sensitivity. So we've been on the planet in our current form for something like 200,000 years. And for the vast majority of that time, survival was the only game in town. If we weren't alert and looking out for all the dangers that could seriously injure or kill us, then we weren't going to survive. And something like 1 in 3 people in the Bronze Age met their death in a very untimely and violent fashion. It was a difficult world to survive in. And part of the reason that we are hardwired for this threat sensitivity is that a part of our brain that reacts emotionally to threats, the limbic system, is actually 5 times stronger than the part of our brain which helps us to think rationally, which is front. So in effect, this accounts for the fact that emotion beats logic. If we feel threatened, if we feel challenged, we react emotionally.
That's really interesting, because people talk a lot, don't they, about emotion beating logic, but that's a real scientific fact that's hardwired from our evolution into our brain.
It is, and Glyn came up with a character that features in our book a little bit, which explains this. Glyn.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So, John, we've got this little character that we call Caveman Dave. If we go back to our cave-dwelling ancestors, John, we've got Caveman Dave going about his business. He hears a rustle in the bushes. Most of our listeners will be familiar with fight and flight. I won't go into any great detail, but chemical changes, gas balance changes, oxygen, blood flow increases, heart rate increases. Caveman Dave is now better equipped to either fight any danger that comes out of those bushes or to run away to escape the danger. Of course, when the danger is escaped or killed, all of those physiological changes return to normal in Caveman Dave. The problem with modern day life, John, is, especially with coronavirus, we've got nothing to kill or nothing we can actually run away from. So we get these changes within us, and maybe they bubble away rather than just switching on and switching off.
No, that's really interesting. It explains a lot. I think that's really important for people to understand. So what I'm taking from this is, correct me if I'm wrong, we're saying, we've got this very, very strong survival mechanism, this instinct, which is from our evolution of when we face those very serious, real and present dangers.
Absolutely.
So actually, that was our brains trying to help us, trying to protect us, and that's actually really helpful to us. But we're in an environment at the moment where we're facing all these dangers, and I guess I'm hearing it's good to have a bit of anxiety, because it helps us to focus, but once that anxiety starts to become irrational and disproportionate to the risk, then we risk getting into a very, very different place. Is that fair to say?
Perfect summary, John. Yeah, perfect summary.
In essence, John, what the danger that we face here is that with so much emphasis on the scale of the problem that COVID-19 presents, we can end up catastrophizing. And this is the danger, is that we don't actually rationally think about the dangers that are presented, but we suddenly start to think that society is never ever going to be the same again. It will completely disintegrate, will never work again. There will be millions of people who will die, that the health service will never be able to cope, that our lives are going to be in some way completely fractured. And that's just not true. But because we are hardwired in this way, and emotion beats logic, there is a danger that the COVID-19 crisis could end up with people actually catastrophizing to the point that that they become suffering not merely from mild to moderate anxiety, which is normal and healthy, but they actually suffer from anxiety disorders, which are very different. So mild to moderate anxiety helps us to take an action to avoid a negative outcome. So, for example, if somebody was worried about, if they were lying in bed one night and they set their alarm for the following morning, knowing that they were going to go on holiday, take an early flight, but they were lying in bed and they were worrying about the fact they might miss the flight, that anxiety about missing the flight would cause them to set the alarm earlier. So they take an action. Now, setting the alarm earlier means that you're much less likely to miss your flight. So remember, mild to moderate anxiety, normal and healthy, it makes you take the action to avoid the negative outcome. Anxious people don't miss flights. Laid back people miss flights. We mustn't think anxiety is a bad thing. It's helpful. But the problem is anxiety disorders. There's two types. First one is chronic anxiety, where we have a nagging anxiety or fear or sense of foreboding that never leaves us. It seems to be there persistently all the time in the background. It's a chronic nagging anxiety. The second one is where we have an acute anxiety disorders, where we get huge surges of anxiety, where we find ourselves panicking. Relatively short-lived and usually trigger specific. So acute anxiety, good examples would be a phobia. So if somebody has arachnophobia, fear of spiders, they're absolutely fine most of the time. But if they see a spider crawling towards them on the floor, they suddenly go into a mad panic. Mad panic continues until the spider is removed or they've run out of the room. And of course, if you're really unlucky, you can have both types of anxiety disorder. You can have underlying chronic anxiety with occasional acute episodes. And there will be, in the current crisis, a lot of people who are experiencing chronic anxiety at the moment, this sense of foreboding, this nagging fear.
Okay, fantastic, Rick. That's really helpful, and I think that makes a lot of sense to everybody. So I guess going from that place where you've got a bit of anxiety, a bit of moderate anxiety, which is helpful to enable you to focus and take action and do the things you need to do. How do you go from that place? How do people end up going from that place where it's helpful to that place where it's overwhelming? And I think we've got a slide on this as well, which will pop up here.
Yes, that's right. So I think in summary here, John, just a few points just to help people understand what we're talking about. As Glyn mentioned, we're all prone to this threat sensitivity. Caveman Dave, has had this ingrained in his DNA to be fearful in order to survive. But sometimes that fear is irrational. And then, as we said, mild to moderate anxiety, perfectly normal and healthy, makes us take the action to avoid a negative outcome. So we shouldn't be afraid of anxiety. We shouldn't see it as a bad thing. Sometimes it can be your best friend. It can keep you safe. It can get you places on time. It can make sure you're well prepared. But we have these two types of anxiety disorder, chronic and acute. Chronic, the nagging anxiety. Acute, the anxiety where we get the huge surge. doesn't last very long, but is deeply unpleasant. Horrible to have a panic attack. And in the current climate, we're saying that the individuals who have actually crossed the Rubicon from that normal, healthy anxiety into this state of chronic anxiety, it could even get to the point where they begin to catastrophize and they actually start to have these deeply troubling fears about the future.
Okay, fantastic. That's really helpful there, Rick. So, Glyn, is there anything you'd like to add on that?
I think one thing about catastrophizing, John, I was having a chat with Rick about this the other day. The media have done a great job of keeping us informed, but we do notice that whenever they go to a supermarket, it's one where the shelves are empty. And they go to a hospital, it's one where they focus on all the masked up people who are extremely busy, and this does encourage us to believe that that's what the world has become like. And you know, I mean, I went in my local supermarket the other day, and it was a very friendly place. Of course, people were social distancing, but there were only a few items not stocked, John. So we do want to be challenging that catastrophizing. You know?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yes, yeah. I think that's a very important point, is about the media. I think it is. I always tell people to be selective about what you need to watch, and be selective about where you get your information from, because that can be pretty overwhelming and slanted in its own right. Okay, so that's great. So Rick, one of the things you talk about a lot is about, you use this nice analogy about our mind as a DVD player. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's important. The next stage, John, you're absolutely right, is to understand how our mind actually works. And if we recognise that in actual fact there are three parts of the mind that we're interested in. So the first part of your mind is your conscious mind. So your conscious mind is very much like a DVD player in the sense that it records. So every experience we've ever had in our lives, our conscious mind has actually recorded that experience. It then stores that experience in the subconscious mind. So if we think of the subconscious mind like a DVD library or hard drive, if you will. So we record over here every experience we've ever had. We then store that memory in the subconscious mind over here. And then in between the two, there are a cluster of brain cells which operate as a filter. It's called the reticular activating system, but you don't need to remember the posh name. It operates as a filter, and that filters the thoughts from our subconscious mind into our conscious mind. So just play along with me and I'll give you an example of this, John. Okay? So tell me, John, who was your favourite teacher at school?
I'd say it was Mr. Brooke, my PE teacher at my primary school.
Excellent. And what was it you describe how he looked first of all, John? How did he look, Mr. Brooks?
He was quite a sort of I suppose a stylish guy. He's definitely the coolest of all the teachers. He was well dressed, sporty. He drove an orange Beetle, I remember. He had brown hair. Always looked very well turned out and presented. He was stylish guy. Good.
And why did you like him, John?
I liked him because I thought he was very calm teacher, very patient, and I liked the subject as well. But I just felt I really related to him. I felt he was really interested in us individually, and he was there to help us.
Super. So what you've just done, John, is you've gone into the library, the subconscious mind, or the hard drive, if you prefer. And when I asked you the question, you very quickly searched for a teacher who you really liked at school. You then retrieved that memory, and then you pulled it through the filter and pushed it into your conscious mind. And in your conscious mind, you then replayed the memory. And I know you were actually replaying it because you had a picture in your mind. And the reason I know you had a picture in mind is because you actually described that picture to me. So you were describing what Mr. Brooks looked like, you were actually playing that DVD.
Yes.
That's how the conscious mind and the subconscious mind interact via this filter. But let me ask you a question though, John. When was the last time you thought of Mr. Brooks?
Crikey. Probably about 20 years ago at a school reunion when we were talking about our favourite teachers. So, yeah.
There you go. So what happens is the vast majority of those memories, those DVDs, if you will, they get stored, but they don't get played regularly. And the reason for that is that the filter ensures that it keeps out any random thoughts from coming into our mind. It only wants us to focus on the specifics about what's going on in our life at the moment, particularly the negative things. The job of the filter is to make us aware of life's difficulties. Its job is to help us, and it does this by actually making us a little bit anxious. And if it makes us a little bit anxious, we know that we'll take that action to avoid the negative outcome. So it filters our thoughts on the basis of what is relevant to us. So let me give you another little example, John. So let's imagine I just said to you, John, take a little trip in your car, pop out into your car, jump in your car, drive around your, the area that you live in for about 10 minutes. And whilst you're having your 10-minute drive, make a note of how many red cars you see. So you decide to play along with me, you jump in your car, off you go, you're driving along, looking out at the traffic. Oh, red car over there. You go a bit further, you see another red car parked, you get to a set of traffic lights, watching the cars go, oh, red car. So you're consciously making a note of how many red cars you see. You come back home and I say to you, right, John, don't have to give me an exact number, just give me a very approximate number. How many grey cars did you see? So you'll look quizzically at me and say, what do you mean grey cars? You told me to look for red cars. And if I say to you, no, I know I told you to look for red cars, but I'm just curious, roughly, how many grey cars? Your typical response would be, oh, I've got no idea. I can tell you how many red cars there were. There were loads of them. So we create two problems, because what I did was I set your filter to notice red cars. So you saw all cars. Every car you saw, you were viewing, you were scanning the traffic. But when it came to the filter, only red cars got through the filter. Every other colour was filtered out. So you only noticed red cars. Now, the second problem we've got is you now believe, because you're consciously aware of every red car, you consciously believe red cars are very common. They're not. Red cars make up about 8% of the total cars.
8%.
8%. And 72% are actually grayscale. So somewhere in between black and white. So black, grey, silver, white, all the dull colours. So in a sea of dull colours, the occasional bright colour stands out. Now, if we think about our lives, John, the negative things in our lives are like the red cars. They're actually not that common, but they're very easy to spot. Whereas most of the good things in our lives and the neutral things happen all the time, but they're relatively small. We get up in the morning, we have a nice cup of tea. It's a small positive. We go outside, we get in the car, we think, oh, actually, yeah, nice sunny day. Jump into the car, driving along, a great song comes on the radio. We think, oh, fantastic, I haven't heard this song for years. But they're very small, the positives. They're easily dwarfed by the odd negative. And that's what we're experiencing now with COVID-19. Some of the techniques later on that Glyn in particular is going to describe to you is all about helping us make more attention out of the small positives. Because if you notice all the small positives, in the weighing scale of life, you know, a big number of small positives equals a small number of big negatives.
Mm-hmm.
That weighing scale, and we only need balance. So that's how it works, John. We've got the DVD player, the DVD library, the filter in between, and the filter is hardwired to see the negatives. It's part of that caveman experience, those 200,000 years.
That's really, really fascinating and really great explanation, Rick. I'm sure everybody gets that. And you just got me thinking, actually, I remember many years ago going to buy this new car and thinking I've never seen any of these on the road. And as soon as I decided to buy one, I just saw them everywhere and thought, I bought this car because it's rare, and now everybody's got one. But it's obviously nothing had changed. I'm just noticing it. So it's a really, really vivid example. So thank you for that. So listen, I think I get this. So we go from this mild to moderate anxiety because our filter is looking out for the scary thing. It's making us constantly play that negative DVD, and it's getting things out of proportion and creating this sense of fear and dread. So we need to start looking at things slightly differently to get that in a better perspective. So that's really helpful. So Glyn, anything you'd like to add to that in terms of that process?
Yeah, I think, John, that we can find ourselves getting trapped in a cycle of negative thoughts. You know, we see more negative stuff. Our filter set that the filter that Rick described sets more to negative, and then we see more negative thoughts. It's a vicious circle. We'll try and look later on how to create a virtuous cycle. But when we are playing lots of negative thoughts, we can become extremely threat sensitive, risk averse, and pessimistic, and we can fall into the trap of self doubt. You know, and believing that we can't cope, losing confidence, and then falling into the trap of self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know have we got time for an example, John?
Yeah, great, go for it.
So I was just thinking, you know, that some of us are going to need, well, most of us are going to need a good community around us to get through this, even though we're trying to isolate as much as we can. But if we fall ill, we're going to need some help. And of course, the NHS are calling on lots of volunteers. Well, you might imagine the person who's living next to neighbours, and he doesn't really speak to them. He, you know, the guy thinks, oh, if I need my neighbours, they'll never come to my assistance. Then the following day he sees them on the drive. And of course, he said, you know, because of his beliefs about his neighbours, he drops his shoulder and turns away and ignores his neighbours. You know, and of course, his neighbours think, well, he's there ignoring us again. And then when the guy does become ill, phones his neighbours for some help, they think he's the last person we want to help. And he said, "See, I was right. I needed my neighbours, and they weren't there for me." You know, so self-fulfilling prophecies. We want to look out for. We want to look out for not making those, John. You know.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so I think we've given everybody a really good understanding now of how the mind works and why it takes us to these automatic negative thoughts. So I guess what everybody's going to be dying to hear now is, okay, let's get some. Can you give me some practical examples of how this can work? So how do we start to break this cycle then?
Just that's really important actually, and I know Glyn's a bit of an expert on this actually, because it's really important to understand the role of thinking errors in this, Glyn, isn't it?
Right. So if we're thinking about thinking errors, John, there's a myriad of thinking errors, but really they boil down to not 9 or 10.
And if I can just jump in, it's the thinking errors, Glyn, if I'm right. The thinking errors actually hold that filter in place, don't they?
Yeah. So the filter, John, that Rick spoke about, that determines what we play in our DVD player in our conscious mind, can be held in place negatively by thinking errors. So I'm kind of going to put myself on the spot here and see how many I can name. So just a few. All or nothing thinking in black and white terms, disqualifying the positive, overgeneralizing, magnification and minimization. I will give some examples in a bit, John. We jump to conclusions. We reason that our emotions reflect reality. We use should statements that puts a lot of pressure on ourselves. We can label and mislabel things, people, groups of people. or get into one called personalization, when we blame ourselves or someone else for events that were outside of their control. But I'll narrow some of those down, John, and just give some COVID-19 examples. So magnification and minimization. We magnify our mistakes and our weaknesses and minimize our strengths and positives. So we will have people saying, I just can't cope with what's going on. I don't have the resources to cope with this. They'll be thinking of all the times they've made mistakes and have struggled with a situation, and they'll be minimizing all the great qualities they've got to get through this, John. Jumping to conclusions, the world will never be the same again, or even worse, I'm going to get ill, I'm going to die. We might then catastrophize and think, well, I'll never see my children again. Disqualifying the positives. I was talking to a consultant occupational health physician the other day, John, and I know Rick knows this particular lady as well. And she pointed out that incidences of norovirus, the terrible stomach ailment, and conjunctivitis, the infection of the eye, they've actually almost dropped off the face of the British medical landscape because people are practicing better personal hygiene. We might also see, John, a positive that comes of this is there might be fewer flu cases in the future if we habitually practice better hygiene and better practices when we are feeling symptomatic, such as we're sneezing or coughing. So actually, there will be positives that come from this. Getting to know your thinking errors is very useful, John, and recognizing these. But crucially, they keep that making thinking errors and letting them go unchallenged keeps that filter locked in negative. Okay,
fantastic, Glyn. Thank you. And really, some really good stuff there. And also, I think we'll pick up a bit later on that you mentioned about habits and habitually, because clearly that's really important in making change. So if we could then, gentlemen, I'm just going to pop up a summary slide there just to remind everybody of summarize what we've really just talked about there.
Sure.
Before we move on to our practical tips.
Yeah, so very briefly again, John, you can see those little pictures there. The conscious mind is this DVD player that's constantly recording every experience we've ever had. Over the course of a lifetime, something like 24 million images will be recorded and then stored in that library, the subconscious mind, or the hard drive if you prefer. The filter sits between the two, and the filter decides which thoughts it will allow into the conscious mind. So just as Glyn was explaining there, if we are making thinking errors where we disqualify the positives, we ignore the good things that will come out of the current crisis, then if we only focus on the bad things, it's not rocket science, we're going to feel pretty negative. So if we're playing negative DVDs with negative thoughts equals negative feelings, and we tend to act negatively. So the three elements of behavior: thoughts, feelings, actions. But it all starts with a thought. And if all we're doing is making negative thoughts because of these thinking errors, then that is going to significantly affect our mood.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so we've talked a lot about why we think and act like we do. Let's get into some of the next steps. Step 4 from Think Yourself Happy, in terms of how do you master the use of your positive mind. So this sounds good. So I'm sure we're all dying to hear about this. So over to you guys.
Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to give you we're going to focus on 3 techniques. And all of these are designed to help challenge the thinking errors. So Glyn, I think you're going to kick off with our first one.
So let's utilize that DVD library system so we can all create what we might call a positive list. So it's simply a list of those positive DVDs or positive memories from any time in our life. You can do it chronologically if you like, all the way through. Some people will, well, actually, I do encourage people to write them down, not just to think about them. Sight is the dominant sense, John. So you can see even just a bullet point.
So get yourself a nice book then, Glyn.
Get yourself a nice book, yeah. And you know, I do encourage clients, John, to come up with 20 of these, and I'll run you through how to best do it. But don't feel you've got to do all 20 in one go. Maybe you know, start building up, thinking of three a day. Think of people who've had a big effect in your life, places which are associated with great memories, hobbies, achievements, life's pleasures, big or small. When we've thought of a positive DVD, so let's say I don't know, winning a sporting contest, don't just think of it like that though. Actually transport your mind back there and utilize your senses, John. All the senses if you can. So what did you see there? And flesh it out. You know, not just, oh, I picked up a trophy. It was great. You know, who was stood by you as you were getting the trophy, or who made the last pass that led to the goal, or whatever. You know, are there any smells you can recall? What were you hearing? So if you won a sporting competition, excuse me, were people cheering? You know, you might have gone for a snack afterwards, where you know, or you know, I remember taking my kids to McDonald's one day after they won a football tournament, so they might remember eating the snacks.
Should we give a few of our favourites, Glyn?
Well, why don't we start with John? Let's put John on the spot. So, John, think of one of your positive DVDs and see if we can help you get some detail out around it.
Okay. I thought I was asking the questions here, but put me on the spot now. So.
Sorry.
So, well, for me, I guess the one that jumps straight into my mind is the birth of my daughter, leaving the hospital with that baby.
So what I'd ask you to do, John, is think of, can you remember how she smelled? Babies have that lovely smell, don't they? Well, you know, for most of the time anyway. But you know, try and imagine how you positioned her in the car when you put her into that baby seat for the first time. What was she wearing, John? You know, so just give us a few more details now. Just pull them through from that subconscious hard drive DVD library, through that filter into the DVD player, John. Yeah.
So I remember leaving the hospital, going out the door. It's a sunny day. I remember just being conscious of the sun. It was late autumn, beautiful day. Hearing the birds singing. She's in a little blue, I don't know what we call them now. It's a long time since my kids were young, but a little blue carry cot thing.
Yeah.
And took her to the car, holding her there, and she feeling like she's very fragile, and she smelt sort of like baby sort of talc powder. I think she had on like a little pink outfit, and then I remember thinking she just looked so gorgeous and vulnerable. And I remember getting in the car, and I remember the song that was playing on the radio at that time as well, the Lightning Seeds, which dates it. So every time I hear that song on the radio now, I get that memory. So yeah.
Great. So that's a great one, John. And even while you were talking, you know, I think Rick and I were probably both transported back to similar memories. Interestingly, I was just transported to thinking of walking through a forest when you said autumn. You know, so when we play these positive DVDs, that can have quite a profound effect on our mood at that time. So of course you will have recognised the feelings that DVD evoked in you. So. Yeah. And if we spend more time practicing the habit of playing positive DVDs and reflecting on our list after we've written it down, of course, we're challenging those thinking errors and getting that filter into positive.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Because I actually felt myself, as I was saying that, I felt myself smiling, but physiologically changing as well. I just felt the emotions in my body really changing, a really warm, fuzzy feeling. And, this is a really powerful thing, isn't it? That when you can evoke that emotion of that happy memory, it really does change so many things. And I mean, this is something I try and use myself with my sports clients, where if I've had, for example, footballers who've stopped scoring goals, I get them to go back to times when they were on fire, always felt they were going to score. And just recreating that feeling is really powerful. They go out on the pitch with a different instinct. So yeah, it's an incredibly simple but powerful thing to do. So okay, so come on guys, I'm back to asking the questions now. So how about just to keep it going here, so Rick, come on, tell me one of your what would be on your list of these positive memories?
That's a good one, John. So for me, and when Glyn mentioned doing things chronologically, so my earliest, happiest childhood memories.
Long time ago, Rick.
And in Portsmouth, of course, we have a beach down at Southsea, and I remember as a kid, spending hours and hours as a family down on the beach, with my brothers and sisters, and also with my auntie Mari also had 4 kids, so there was 4 in our family, 4 in hers, so there was 8 kids, and my cousins, including the legendary cousin Eddie. We would spend hours down playing on the beach, swimming in the sea. It always, in my mind, it was always sunny. I'm sure it wasn't, but frequently, it was sunny. The sea was always cold, though. And I can remember the smell of the sea, and if we'd been good, we'd get an ice cream. So again, all those emotions, flooding through me when I think of that. I can't help but have a smile on my face. And you mentioned earlier, John, about the fact that you do get these feelings going through you. And of course, Glyn, you're a bit of an expert on neurotransmitters. You might want to explain a little bit about what happens when we start to engage. We write these positives down. We start to play the DVD using all our senses. And the next thing we know is we're getting a chemical reaction.
Yeah, so many people will think that we need chemical supplementation for increasing neurotransmitters, John. Actually, neurotransmitters tend to come from the diet that we eat. They're there. It's just about triggering them. We talked about Caveman Dave. When he's hearing the rustle in the bushes and his energy, his blood is up, it's something called the sympathetic nervous system switches on. When we calm down, relaxed, and doing stuff like the positive DVD list, the parasympathetic nervous system switches on, and we actually release lots of neurotransmitters. I won't go into the science, but basically it's 4 dopamine pathways in the brain, and these neurotransmitters are traveling along those, John. And the science seems to suggest that an uptake in these neurotransmitters helps us fight all manner of psychological or mental health difficulties.
Yeah,
I think probably serotonin is probably the best known one, Glyn.
Yeah, we tend to call that one the feel-good chemical, don't we, John? And that's certainly what's manipulated in many antidepressant medicines.
Yeah,
but there are many more that are released by practicing techniques like the positive list.
Yeah, and that's incredibly powerful, isn't it? We've got the power ourselves by doing something as simple as this, that positive list, looking those memories, to create something more powerful and without the potential side effects you've got from chemical substances like that. So that's really, really powerful. I totally get that. So that's hopefully really interesting for people, that your mind is so powerful. Okay, so that's really helpful, that thing about the positives. I think everybody's got a great idea of that, really writing those things down, creating that emotion. It just transports you into a different place. So
well, if we can just throw in there, what I often say to people is write 3 down every night. And if you do it last thing at night, just before you get into bed, you get into the habits. You mentioned habits. You get into the habit every night of writing down 3 positive memories, and then after you've written each one, you spend a few minutes playing the DVD. You're much more likely to find that you have sweet dreams afterwards. So it may well aid your sleep, and if you do go to sleep, you'll often end up drifting off thinking of those happy memories.
You can tie that in, John, with regular diary keeping, I think. Well,
yeah, that's one of our.
That's one of our. Yeah.
In fact, let's go into that actually, because that is.
This is the second technique around the regular diarying. Then, so that diarying, if that's the right word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, journaling, as it's often called, keeping a journal, it's a key part of lots of different elements in psychological well-being. But the idea and the way we ask people to do it is, again, once you've completed your list, if you've got your list of 20, so you've done 3 a night for 7 nights, you've got to your 20, the next thing to go on to is to now start to look for the positives in each day. So again, at the end of the day, you get your book out and you just jot down what happened during the day. You try not to miss out anything, but you don't have to write sentences, you can just do bullet points. So we go through the day, good and bad, everything that happened. And the challenge we set people is to score the day out of 10. 1 is it was a dreadful day. 10 is it was a fantastic day. Now the challenge is, do not let it slip below a 5. Now the way you stop it slipping below a 5 is you've got to constantly find little positives. And every little positive is another half a point. So you look through the day, and even when it's been a really difficult day, so, you know, Glyn and I are on a rota to help our staff at the hospital where we work in Walsall. And today I was listening to a poor staff nurse who was having a bit of a meltdown. And she was telling me about everything that had gone wrong. And it only took me up to ask her a few questions in terms of, well, just tell me a couple of things that went right. And immediately the filters were flipped around. And she started to come up with a few positives. They were small ones. But again, the more small ones that you find, the more it bumps up the score. And then I said to her, I said, do you think you could have tried any harder today? She said, no. She said, I've absolutely worked my socks off. I said, so you can go home and look at yourself in the mirror and say, the effort that I put into today was excellent. She said, yeah. I said, well, that's a positive. So the positive in the negative is that you really put the effort in, that you're proud of the fact that you didn't stop, you kept going. So when we're starting to look at how we score the day, it isn't just about finding the nice things, about the person who smiled and thanked us, about the nice cup of tea we had, about, you know, the fact that somebody sent us a funny message on our text messages. Oh yes, they're pleasurable, they're happy things, they're things that will bump the score up. But what about finding the positives in the negatives? You know, finding, you know, the fact that people in adversity do put the effort in. They do make a real effort to improve other people's lives. And that's, you know, that's all we can focus on sometimes, is it's about our effort. So, you know, if we do that, we can find we bump the scores up by noticing those little positives, and we get to at least a 5. So I'm going to put Glyn on the spot, because he put you and me on the spot earlier, asking us about our things for our positive list. So give us an example of what would your diary look like for today, Glyn, or yesterday? You can pick either.
Okay, so yeah, so interestingly, yesterday started out quite challenging for me. Mm-hmm. So I was at work at the hospital, and it was a challenging start to the day, and then it got better. You know, so let's have a think. So after the challenging start, which actually did end up falling in my favour, I think, I was then called over to a ward at the hospital.
Because I think there was a bit of a disagreement, wasn't there?
There was a minor disagreement with a person who is a reasonable and lovely person,
yeah,
which sometimes makes it worse, because you don't want to fall out with reasonable and lovely. Well, we didn't fall out, but you know, it was just a challenging start. But luckily, later on, that lady and I were able to find a solution to the situation. But I was called over to the hospital.
And were you happy with the effort you put in? So you didn't enjoy the actual interaction where you were having the disagreement, but were you happy with your own behaviour?
That's interesting, because we can only control our own behaviour, can't we? So
absolutely,
I would argue that I'd give my response a 7.5 out of 10 So lessons to learn, but I didn't let myself down. Yes.
Good man. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did a lovely piece of work that I really enjoyed. I was called over to a ward. Very hard-working people. They'd found time for 4 of their leadership team to come and learn a technique that they can teach. You'll know this, Rick, the group huddles.
Oh yeah.
That they can utilise at the end of every shift. And these are extremely hard-working nurses who could see the value straight away. So not only did I enjoy teaching it, I enjoyed the feedback from it. I know I had at least 3 calls from people who were extremely anxious, so relating to this. So I might even get them to watch this webcast, John, when it goes out. And I think they all felt better for the work. A friend of mine who is currently isolated, she hasn't got the disorder, the virus, but she did develop a cough. She actually had prepared lots of frozen food for my freezer for me, so that was good. So I had to pick that up from somewhere, so not to come into contact with her. Copious use of hand gel and sanitization chemicals. So that was nice. So somebody had cooked for me, and then what did I do in the evening? I haven't got my diary with me now, but so whatever I did in the evening, I started rewatching one of my favourite comedy shows, because it's been a while since I've seen it, so I can't remember all the gags. So I started rewatching that on Netflix.
Which one's that, Glyn?
Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I highly recommend it to everybody. Yeah, 99. Yeah, so
that's not a paid plug, is it? That's
it's not, no. But
so how would you have scored yesterday overall then, Glyn? So lots going on.
Yeah.
Not all of it positive. I mean, obviously you had the disagreement first thing.
No, I don't know whether I would score my day higher because of the challenge earlier on, because of how it ended up. I would say the 18-year-old version of me would have scored the day low, because that would have clouded the whole day.
Yeah.
The 47-year-old psychotherapist version of me would be giving it a good 8-9 out of 10. Yeah, well, it wasn't lottery winning, but it was a pretty good day. Yeah.
So I think that's really good, Glyn. I mean, it's a good example of, if Glyn had been writing that up last night, the more that he would have put down the positives, including all those little positives, and not leaving anything out. Quite often I'm surprised, when I look at people's diary entries, they talk about work, and then they say, and that was the end of that day, and the following day, and I say, whoa, what happened in the evening? And they say, oh yeah, the evening was okay, it was all right. I said, well, why haven't you written that down? Because that's part of your day.
Yeah, disqualifying the positive.
Absolutely. Thinking error. So it's almost as if it didn't count because it wasn't to do with work.
Yeah.
But actually, we're not just work people. We have a life outside work, and it's important to look at all of our life. And then I think you've got a third one. So we've got the positive list, John, which is from any time in your life. Then we've got the diary, which hones in on today. What's going on today? Can we pick out the positives today? And then, Glyn, you've got a third one that we quite like.
Yeah. So if we think that the positive list and the diary are quite specific, John, we can go to the general with the gratitude list. So this is just recognizing everything we've got to be grateful for, and it's even better to do it now, because there are so many things we've taken for granted that have been temporarily removed from us, haven't they? So meeting our friends, going to the pub, the gym, just being able to come and go as you please. Certain items in the supermarkets, thankfully it's getting better, but I will never take toilet roll for granted again. Again, gentlemen, So just get that nice notebook out that Rick mentioned earlier, and start writing down everything that you are grateful for. even the small things, John, that we all live in England. We don't go thirsty in England, do we? If we're thirsty, there's free running water, everywhere. But maybe we think, what a glass of water? He's really telling me to be grateful for a glass of water. Yeah, I am. So let's look at all the things we're grateful for: loving family, friends, Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Netflix. The fact that we can afford these things to John. What I like to do with the gratitude list is, if you are in a particularly challenging moment, actually try and be grateful for what's going on around you at this present time. So I remember having a tough day in London one day, just tiring really more than anything else. I got on the tube at Knightsbridge. Somebody trod on me and really hurt me, and didn't apologise or acknowledge what they'd done. And I've got two reactions really that I knew I could draw upon. I could start arguing with the person, or I could go to, what have I got to be grateful for around me now? It was that, well, I'm already on my way home. Travel in London is relatively quick and inexpensive. I was warm, I was dry, I wasn't waiting ages for a tube for a train on the tube to come. So actually, by that, I switched those filters around very quickly. And some people go, why didn't you just have a go at the guy? That would have made me feel better. Well, actually, what is success here is making us feel better. And actually, it didn't matter how that guy went home feeling. Mm-hmm. It was how I went home feeling. Yeah. So again, gratitude list. In general, what have I got to be grateful for in life? Review the list regularly. And when life is difficult, stop. What have I got to be grateful for now at this moment in time?
Yeah, that's so important. So yeah, to have my own personal example of that. So as you know, I came back recently from South America, had a fantastic time, loved it, really interesting, different, exciting. But coming back, the things that after being away for a while you take for granted, and one of them is being back in England, the security that we have. We really take this. We live in a very safe country where things work, where we might, the things we complain about are pretty trivial, really. We are safe, we're secure, things function, and even in a time of crisis, as you say, when you go to the supermarket, most people are being, behaving well, being pretty calm, good manners, so really things that we really should be grateful for, that we are incredibly lucky living in this country, or another, if you're listening in countries like the US, Australia, things we really take for granted. But these are things that other people don't have that luxury. So I totally get that. So that's really great. So that's three really fantastic techniques. And the thing I like about these is they are very simple. They're very easy to do. They're very powerful. So what I'd like to do is just to summarize on those things. So just pull up that slide again. So I ask you guys if you could just briefly recap on those 3 points that we've talked about there to master your positive mind.
That's it, John. Absolutely. This is step 4 out of the 6 steps in Think Yourself Happy. So remember, these are all designed to help challenge the thinking errors. So with the current crisis, we've got lots of negative thoughts coming into our mind. How do we challenge those negative thoughts? By providing examples of the good things in our lives. So we start with a positive list from any time in our life. It could be childhood, it could be adolescence, it could be, your best friend at school, your pet cat when you were younger, it could be playing for the school netball team, it could be the first music concert you went to, getting your first job, passing your driving test. It could be life's little pleasures, that first cup of tea in the morning, a lovely walk on somewhere like Cannock Chase. It could be anything. But if we regularly get into the habit of every night writing these things down, then we start to challenge the idea that everything in the world is dreadful at the moment. The second one is the daily journal. So we're getting into the current time frame rather than going from any time in our lives. It's what's good in my life now. And it's okay in your diary to write about the challenging things, as Glyn mentioned. He had a tough start to the day yesterday, and what was the positive there was the fact that he dealt with it in a very calm, professional, and dignified manner. So another little tip there: CPD. You'll find lots of these in the book. But if we deal with everybody in life in a calm, professional, and dignified manner, then we can be pleased with what we can control, which is our behaviour. We can't control other people. Just as Glyn said with that rude person on the tube, we can't control other people, we can only control ourselves. And then finally, the gratitude list. So Glyn gave you 2 ways of doing it. One is to sit down and actually write down all the things you're grateful for in your life. What have I got to be grateful for? And I like the other one, which was all about doing it in the moment. When you are suddenly caught in a particular situation, when you're feeling particularly stressed or particularly down, to then say to yourself, yes, even though things are difficult at the moment, what have I got to be grateful for? And you will find those things if you do that, even in difficult times.
That's fantastic. So thank you, Rick. So some really powerful stuff there. And again, I think it's particularly pertinent that we really should only focus on what we can control, because quite often we focus on beating ourselves up about things that we really can't control. So that's really great. But let's deal with the elephant in the room, shall we? Clearly, we are talking about coronavirus, and there is a harsh reality here that people are going to die from this. So while it may not affect many of us, this is a harsh reality that we're living in. So what tips can you give us specifically around dealing with the coronavirus pandemic?
I think we can draw on the example of a fellow called Admiral James Stockdale, Jim Stockdale, who taught us a lot about facing up to use harsh realities, and that's right. He actually pointed out that we need to recognise brutal reality if there is a brutal reality. And what Stockdale, a bit of background, Stockdale is the highest ranking officer, I think, to ever be taken as a prisoner of war from the American Armed Forces, and it was during Vietnam. He was held in the notorious Hanoi Hilton, which, Rick, what's the proper name?
It's Lao Hui, I think it was called.
That's easy for you to say, Rick. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll refer to it as the Hanoi Hilton. It was a prisoner of war. It was a prisoner of war camp, and he was there for nearly 8 years, I think. And I think some sources have suggested he's the most tortured American of all time. And it's important to note that he never broke. He survived the incarceration. Never broke, but he noticed that there was a paradox. We call it the Stockdale paradox, that actually neither pessimistic people or optimistic people did very well when there was a brutal truth. They were living a brutal truth. So pessimists, the people who were very filtered to recognise all the doom and gloom, all the misery, did die first of the disease, malnutrition and torture. Jim Stockdale recognised, John, that the optimists actually seemed to fare very well for a time. And this went against his training. He was trained as a Stoic philosopher. And he thought, the optimists are doing very well. But he noticed that they were basing their optimism often on stuff that was outside of their control, such as they'd be rescued by their friends, which, of course, they had no control or influence over whatsoever.
We'll be home by Christmas.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So he heard them saying, we'll be home by Christmas. He noticed that many of them, when Christmas came and went, didn't crash straight away. They were able to reframe it to Easter. But very few people were able to remain optimistic after 2 failures, John. And he noticed that those people died very shortly after the second deadline, if you like, had failed to materialise. So Stockdale identifies to us that actually balanced thinking, or we might call it realistic optimism, is the way forward. To summarise, we can't guarantee success, John, in almost anything. We can't guarantee success. But if we practice the right behaviors, we give ourselves the best chance of it. Yeah. So actually, we want to get away from this idea of really positive psychology. You know, if I think well, I'll stay well. You know, if I tell myself every day, I'll get that job, I'll get that job. Actually, it's about practicing the right behaviors and increasing your chances of success.
I think that's a brilliant example, Glyn, because if you think about COVID-19, John, you know, we're in this situation of lockdown, and whilst we might not be prisoners of war in the Hanoi Hilton, but we are in a situation where many people, particularly elderly people who are on their own, may feel almost prisoners in their own home. And you know, we mustn't fall into the pessimistic view of, oh my God, I'm going to be here, I'm going to, you know, forever. We'll never get out of lockdown. It's a disaster. I'll end up going mad. Equally, we mustn't say to ourselves, it's only for a couple of weeks. We'll be fine. A couple of weeks, everything will be back to normal. We'll be popping down to the local for a few beers. We'll be fine. You know, we've got to have a realistic, face up to the brutal truth, but paradoxically remain optimistic that if we do the right things, we will get there eventually. But it's going to be months. We will get there if we do the right things. And perhaps I can share another little story which I think helps. It's the story of Viktor Frankl. Many people may remember that name. He was one of those unfortunate people, the Jews, who were sent to Auschwitz in the Second World War. And Viktor Frankl was quite an educated man.
He was a doctor.
He was. And he saw I think it was his wife, his father and his mother all sent to the gas chambers.
And his brothers. So obviously he was in this dreadful place, and anybody who's been to Auschwitz, and I recommend it. It's grim, but it's a terrific place to visit to make you realise how inhuman people can be. But Frankl came out of it. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to be able to imagine how he would describe his experiences in the future. And he wanted to be able to tell a really positive story about the way that he had acted. So in order to be able to tell that story in the future, he had to translate that into actions in the present. So he went out of his way to try and encourage and show small acts of kindness to all the other prisoners in Auschwitz. And he was an inspirational figure, and even many of the guards found him quite inspirational. The thing was, he knew he could only control his own behaviour. He could control nothing else. And it goes back to the point that you made earlier, John. If we redefine success in terms of our behaviour, not other people's, then we are in control of our own destiny, and we're in control of our own mood, because we can feel good about our behaviour.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, Stockdale did it with redefining success. He didn't say, I'll escape from here and I'll live a great life back in America. It was always, I will do nothing that will help the enemy in their, in their efforts. So he could control that, whereas being liberated by his colleagues he couldn't influence that at all.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And obviously in a time like we're in now, where many things are outside of our control, we naturally want to go towards trying to fix things. I think solution fixation, you call it, and I'm sure many people are going quietly mad about this.
Our favourite.
Johnny, I know I've mentioned this to you before, and as soon as you just started talking there, I thought, ask me about solution fixation. Sometimes, John, especially when I'll try and keep this one simple because it's less of a technique and just for some people to be aware of. When we start to get worried, John, we get in that cycle of worry. And we will know that some people actually worry about worrying, which is a terrible state to be in. But often people won't allow themselves to let their minds drift to stuff like the positive list or gratitude. listing because they think if I'm not worrying, I won't find the answer to why I'm worrying or what I'm worrying about. So we do need to break that cycle by saying, actually, no, the solution isn't there if I fixate on the worry. Fixing X, Y, and Z problems isn't actually the problem. It's massively worrying that's the problem. So what is success? That I can give myself some respite from the worry. And I can do that by the techniques that are in the book we've mentioned today. Think Yourself Happy, by just following the techniques that we've already described. I hope we've got time for one or two more, but just be mindful if you are trapped in that, I can't rest from worrying because then I won't find the answer. Do step away from it. Do break that cycle. So don't fixate on finding a solution to all your worries.
I think the problem is as well, John, is that solution fixation is likely to be exacerbated at this particular time because so many people are on their own or are at home and they're having to work from home, so they haven't got as many distractions around them. They've in fact replaced many of the many of the psychological benefits we get from work. So they've lost the structure to their week, they've lost a sense of purpose, they don't have any social contact. Their self-esteem isn't being fed because they've got people praising them for a job well done. So there's a whole raft of psychological benefits that we get from work, which if you have to work from home or you've been laid off, you're on furlough, you just don't have anymore. And with all that time on your hands, with not enough to do, then the chances of solution fixation starting to creep into your thinking is much higher.
Okay, that's really fascinating, Rick. So
there is a technique.
What do we do about that?
Yeah, we have a technique for that. It's called +4s.
Is this your this based on your golf attire, gents?
Well, yeah.
The golf trousers.
Yeah, well, it's one we particularly like. Glyn, take us through +4s because these are the 4 activities, aren't they?
I'll see if I can. Yeah, they are. I use them every day. I'll see if I can remember them in order from the book, John, as well. No, actually, the order is less important. So, so first of all, there are 4 activities to a great day, but they're very general activities. They're not specific. And remember, when we practice these activities that I'll quickly run through in a minute, put them in the diary. So the first one is mini projects. So this is just getting stuff done, John, but it's recognizing that the human mind can become bored very, very easily. And if we become bored, we become demotivated. And if we become demotivated, then that's a foundation for a bad mood. So we want to experience the rewards of effort and achievement, particularly effort. So get stuff done. So, wash up, do a bit of gardening, but specify what the job is and think, can I do this in less than an hour? Might be moving a bigger job forward, John. So you might think, well, I want to decorate the spare bedroom, but that's going to take me a couple of days. So break that down into chunks, small bite-sized chunks of an hour. Another great way of getting some real reward from mini projects is to ask yourself, what tasks have I been putting off? So have I been procrastinating? How good will I feel if I start ticking off some of those jobs? And do make a list that you can see yourself either score through or tick next to. I'm one of those who likes to put a little square next to the task, and if it's half completed, I put a line through and I put a full cross when it's done, John. But mini projects gives us a great sense of effort, satisfaction, and achievement. Phone a friend, is that what the second one, Rick? Yeah. So phone a friend, John. Essentially, it's investing in relationships. So we want to identify those key people in our lives those people who mean the most to us, and then say, how can I get creative with these? And of course, some of those people we might be separated from indefinitely at this moment in time, particularly if they're elderly, and we've been asked not to visit them. So how can we get creative with adding value to their lives, John? When we phone a friend or invest in these relationships, usually both parties feel better. But we've never had the challenge, had this so challenging. You know, we've got to get creative with how we invest in those people. I would encourage everybody watching this webcast, John, to start to think about who are those valuable people in your life. Who are those most valuable people? And just ask yourself, do I give those people enough of me? Or am I spreading myself too thinly? Doesn't mean we can't have lots of other acquaintances and friends, John. But what it does mean is we are always coming back to that group of people and making sure they get the cream of us. They get the best of our energy. So we've got mini projects, phone a friend. Help me out, Rick. Which one's next?
Well, excuse me, altruism.
Altruism, yeah. So altruism, John, it's just small acts of kindness. So it's doing more acts of kindness for the world in general, but it's also about recognizing the small acts of kindness we're already doing. It's not about getting on top of a tall building and shouting how great you are, but it is about recognizing yourself, how valuable you are to the world, John. If we don't recognize the value we offer to the world, then our self-esteem will plummet. So it is about recognizing those small acts of kindness and putting them down as successes in our diary. You know, I shall be in the office tomorrow at that large hospital trust where we're helping out. The staff there will definitely be busier than I will be when I first walk in, John. So I will be the one who offers to make the tea round. You know, I mean, I want one too. But of course, that they can breathe. It just gives them a bit of breathing space. While when I'm going around with a tray and dropping a coffee or a cup of tea, and of course I'm benefiting from it because I'm recognising the value I've been to those people. So altruistic acts, we can spot them when we're driving home, John. Have we just flashed somebody out at the junction? You know, let a bus in front of us. 50 people have just got home quicker because of our act of kindness. So let's make sure we're doing more acts of kindness and recognizing them and recognizing the ones we're already doing.
Yeah.
And the fourth activity of the plus fours, it's proper selfishness. So it's very important to point out here that proper selfishness is not actually being selfish. Selfishness impoverishes other people. Proper selfishness recharges our batteries, makes sure we're looked after, so then we can then in turn help those people who need us. The phrase was coined by Charles Handy. Yeah, is that right, Rick? Yeah. And he referenced being on an aeroplane, John. You know, you're a fit, healthy, strong young person. You sat between two vulnerable, less physically less capable people. The aeroplane gets into distress. The oxygen masks fall down. We've all been told what to do. Can you remember, John, whose mask do you put on first?
Well, I suppose it seems sort of counterintuitive, but you need to put on your own mask first.
You do, John. We're nice people. We want to turn and help the two vulnerable people, but they're much more difficult to help if we're struggling. Our mask is the easiest one to put on, and then actually we've got all the time and oxygen in the world to then help those people. So while they might have had a few moments of added distress, we might actually have exposed them to less distress because we're far more comfortable and confident now in that environment. But proper selfishness, it's not about making sure that we're staying alive, John, on trouble-stricken airplanes. It's about doing the nice things that recharge our batteries. So again, what do we enjoy doing? You know, the small things that we can do several times a day, like the cup of tea or the coffee, stopping for a nice lunch, you know, exercising in an evening wherever you're allowed, watching your favourite TV programme, a bubble bath, planning for a holiday, so we've got things to look forward to, and then of course the ultimate act of proper selfishness would be going on that holiday.
Yeah.
So don't hesitate to identify the things that you enjoy doing, then either engage in them with other people or on your own. It's proper selfishness doesn't have to be an isolated activity, John, you know. So if we want to watch a movie with one of those loved ones we mentioned from Phone a Friend earlier on, you know, it doesn't stop being an act of proper selfishness because we're also investing in that relationship. We're actually probably ticking two boxes there. We're investing in that relationship or phoning a friend, as it were, and we're engaging in proper selfishness.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's fantastic, Glyn, because I think it's one of the things, isn't it, that carers and therapists are always told you need to focus on is you've got to look after yourself to be able to look after your clients. If you're in a good place, you can help the people around you. So I think that's great advice. So I think some fantastic stuff there, and clearly many people are going to never have so much time and opportunity to do some of those things that you've talked about. So, you know, so some things there that you've got the time, you've got the opportunity, and the thing is going to be great for you and those around you to do. So, but clearly, as you talk about, look into the future is really important, and we are going to come out of this period in the not too distant future. So, do you think things are just going to go back to normal, just back to the way we are, and we'll just carry on as was?
That's a really good question, John. I think we've actually got a slide that just summarises the last subject, but I will come on to that. But if we can,
okay, yeah, let's just pop that up to summarise that excellent point. So,
what we've really been focusing on there really is that in the current climate that we face with the COVID-19 crisis, is we do have to face up to the brutal truth. This is going to be a difficult, painful time for us. Our freedoms are being limited, and it's not going to end anytime soon. However, if we remain optimistic about the eventual outcome and we do the right things, we will get there. We talk about the importance of redefining success in terms of our behaviour rather than other people's. So the important thing is with redefining success is that we're happy with how we behave. And if we behave in a calm, polite and dignified manner, even when those around us are perhaps not behaving in the same way, we can still feel good about ourselves. And finally, Glyn's just mentioned another little technique, the +4s. So if you add, that's the plus bit, add these 4 activities to every day. Your mini projects, get a list, you know, break big jobs down into smaller jobs and tick the list off. You know, you'll feel really good at the end of the day when you see a list and a whole bunch of ticks. Yeah. Phone a friend, and it, you know, particularly in the current environment, connect. We've got to connect with people. It can be the phone, it can be text message, it can be Skype, it can be Zoom. Or how about this one? How about write somebody a letter? You know, that's a really nice thing to do. Write someone a letter, even if you can't actually put it in the post box. Because you haven't got a stamp and the post boxes are closed, you could push it through someone's door if you're visiting, you know, to drop something off. So these are, as Glyn said, times for us to be a little bit more creative about how we connect with people. Then we've got kind acts, and remember, when we do a kind act, the reward we get is the warm glow. We feel good about ourselves when we do something kind for somebody else. So everybody benefits. And finally, proper selfishness, all about recharging your batteries, John. And important to recognise that if your batteries are fully charged, if you take time out away from the kids, away from work, to do something to recharge your battery, whether it's a soak in the bath or you're going to say, no, I'm going to spend an hour in my garden, you come back with your batteries fully charged, you're ready to help other people.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rick. So I just want to ask, I think, one last question before we summarise. I think we've covered a lot of really interesting stuff there, and obviously there's more detail in the book, and people can watch this on replay as well as they want to cover some of these points again. But Rick, again, just in terms of coronavirus, it's all around us. It's pretty much all we hear about on the news, in the newspapers, front and back page of the newspapers, if you actually get to see a newspaper. How do we keep that in perspective? Because clearly we're hearing about lots of people dying out there. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, two things here, really, John. One is we do need to think about a future beyond coronavirus. So we have to take care of ourselves in the short, the medium, and the long term. So we will get out of this at some point, and it's good to have plans for the future. Now is actually quite a nice opportunity to think about, right, well, how do I want to develop my career going forward? How do I want to optimize my life? You know, what plans have I got for the future, whether they be personal, professional, financial, social, family? You know, how we've got time to reflect at the moment. How do we want to live our lives? So, you know, that's one element of that. And, you know, the future it's always uncertain, I suppose, Glyn, isn't it?
Yeah. So in a way, John, you know, in the grand scheme of things, the period of time that we're going to be affected by coronavirus is very fleeting, but uncertainty is part of being human. One of the things that Rick and I and yourself will address in our clients is often an intolerance of uncertainty. Sometimes you just got to say, you know, I've got to be prepared to accept the discomfort of the intolerance of uncertainty. I mean, my own life took a turn last year, John, and I remembered through it. I thought, what would I advise a client who is going through what I'm experiencing now? And I thought, you know, can I have a plan that will keep me motivated through this period of uncertainty and this particularly significant life challenge? And John, I'd always dreamed of owning a narrowboat. Ever since I was a small child, I wanted to have a narrowboat or even live on one. And actually, as my life changed last year, I thought this might be the perfect opportunity to buy a narrowboat and move on and live on it. And although I did experience my own psychological discomfort last year as my life took that unexpected turn, I wasn't waking up every day thinking about the woes, the travails that were surrounding me. I was often waking up thinking, I'm looking at a narrowboat today. I'm going to look at another one, or I'm going to get online and see what narrowboats are available, and ended up buying a narrowboat, getting a beautiful mooring on the Shropshire Union Canal, John, and you know, and living the dream, and that came as the most significant period of uncertainty in my life. So you know, just good healthy psychology kept me going through a very difficult time, and was able to manage the uncertainty and turn it into a huge positive.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I'd like to start drawing things to a close. We've covered lots of good stuff. So, gents, if you could just really recap on the key points that we have covered here, and I will pull up a slide. After that, actually. So, do you want to have just recap on the key points we've got there?
So yeah, just talking a little bit about the future there, John. It's just important to recognise that this will not last forever, and therefore it's actually a very healthy thing to do, to have things to look forward to, whether they be big or small. On the slide, we've got a few examples of things that you might want to think about looking forward to. Some of them will be in the short term, obviously, some of them perhaps in the medium term. And the more we anticipate a happy or an enjoyable experience in the future, the anticipation actually also helps release some of those lovely neurotransmitters when we think about what we're looking forward to. So we feel better. And as we said earlier, at this time, there is an opportunity for us to reflect on our lives. What do we want out of our lives? It is an uncertain world, but maybe we need to make some changes going forward. Maybe we need to make some plans about how we want to live our lives in the future.
Okay, that's fantastic, Rick. So, anything you'd like to add in summing up?
I think, yeah, in terms of summing up, I'll do a proper sum up in a minute, John. And I just think we just need to, we can't duck the fact that the coronavirus is going to kill thousands of people. Of that, there's no doubt. But one thing that I just want to leave people with, which I think we forget, is that the law of unintended consequences. So, on an average year, we will get well over 500,000 deaths, something like 540,000 people will die a year. That's our mortality rate.
In the UK, yep.
In the UK,
yep.
Yeah. So, what we're going to find is that many of the people who die of coronavirus, unfortunately, sadly, are being robbed of a relatively short period of life, because many of them probably would have died in the next 12 months anyway. They are the most vulnerable, the most frail people. So they are sadly being robbed of a period of life. But it's probably true to say that the actual number of people who die this year may not be any different to a normal year. It's simply that, they are dying with rather than from coronavirus. And the law of unintended consequences means that there will be many positive things which results in fewer deaths. So fewer deaths from influenza, for example, fewer fatal car accidents because nobody's driving at the moment, fewer drink drive accidents. Glyn mentioned earlier norovirus conjunctivitis going down. There may well be a benefit for sepsis, for example. So we may actually find that whilst a number of thousands of people may die from coronavirus, they're probably included in the number for the year as a whole. It's just that we've got them at the front end.
Just I read a stat the other day, John, just about keeping things in perspective, that in I think it was the winter of 2014, 2015, but it might not be that, but it was a recent winter. We had about 25,000 people die of the flu in Britain, in the UK, in that year. And I think estimates of people dying from coronavirus in this country range from 7,000 to 20,000. So we don't often get that many people die of the flu. I've got just for balance. But in a bad year, we will have more people die of the flu than is expected to die of coronavirus in our country.
Okay, that's really interesting. Really interesting perspective.
The thing you asked was for a quick recap on this evening, John, and you're quite right. We need to bring things to a bit of a close. So, we've covered a lot of things tonight, but if we could just recap very briefly, the problem we've got with the current condition with the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic, is that it plays to our natural threat sensitivity as human beings. We are threat sensitive. We are hardwired to spot the danger. It's all about survival. So the problem is we go from mild to moderate anxiety, which is normal and healthy, into developing anxiety disorders, the ones we described earlier, particularly the chronic anxiety, this nagging, horrible anxiety. How does that happen? It happens because we're constantly playing negative DVDs. So we've got a whole raft in our library, a whole raft of DVDs, positives, negatives, and neutrals. But the filter will filter out the positives at a time like this and will only get us to focus on the negatives. The more negative thoughts we get, the more likely we are to suffer from an anxiety disorder or depression. They're very similar in terms of the source. Now, the filter's held in place by the thinking errors, where we make negative assumptions about our world. And unless we challenge those negative assumptions, we won't be able to play the positive DVDs. But we know if we can break that negative thinking cycle by playing the positive DVDs, our mood will improve. We've also talked a little bit about some of the techniques we can use to do that. You know, we talked about the positive list, we talked about the journal, we talked about the gratitude list, and we talked about the lessons we can learn from the likes of people like Viktor Frankl and Jim Stockdale. And all these help us to face up to the brutal truth, yet paradoxically remain optimistic. And remember, it's all about redefining success at the moment. We cannot control, and we should not put any energy into trying to control the things which we can't, which is the pandemic. What we can control is our behaviour. And if we behave in a positive way that we're happy with, we'll feel good about ourselves. And finally, the last part was, if we can look forward to a time beyond this, plan for the future, then we may actually learn many positive lessons which make us better people in the long run.
Fantastic. So I think that's really, really powerful, really, really helpful. Thank you, gentlemen, for putting so much time into this. That's really appreciated. And I know I'm going to be going to bed tonight writing down the three things for my positive list. So that's really powerful. So just in terms of finding out more information, I'm just going to pop a slide up. So how can people find out a little bit more about you guys and what you're doing, and other information they can get about the book download, for example?
Okay, John. So yeah, our website is mindhealthdevelopment.com. So all the W's, mindhealthdevelopment.com, all lowercase. You'll see lots of free articles there that usually Rick or I have written. Lots and lots, actually, a lot more on thinking errors, for example. It says here on the slide a list of all the books that we've authored. So you go into the page, you go into the site, just click on the Our Books, and you'll see the links to all of those. Regular blog posts keeping people up to date. People can contact us through that website free of charge. I don't think we've ever missed a message in the entire history of our company. So people must feel free to send us a message or a question. We will get round to answering them. The book on the screen there, which Rick wrote, Think Yourself Happy, is available as a paperback book or a Kindle download. And by the time this webcast is published, or certainly within a few days of that, there will actually, John, exciting news, be an audio download of the book too. So no excuses for not having a copy of Think Yourself Happy.
That's great, and that will really reinforce a lot of what you've talked about tonight, won't it? With lots of lots of those practical examples and worksheets and things like that.
Yeah,
so
it is a workbook, John, and it does elaborate massively on what we've discussed today. So all of those techniques in depth and many others.
Yeah. And here in front of me, a great read. As you can see, it's a very readable book, very practical as well. So I certainly highly recommend that. So thank you very much for that. And just again, in terms of further information that you can get from myself. So my website is it's www.myfitmind.co.uk. I've also got a Facebook page, and again, a lot of information on there about techniques you can use for helping yourself become less anxious, more confident, talking about the work that I do. My thing really is about helping people overcome anxiety and build new habits about believing better in yourself in as little as 21 days. So I talk a lot about that on my website. Again, if people want to email me, please do. Happy to answer any questions. Also, I do offer free 30-minute consultations. So again, if people want to book one of those with me, happy to have a chat about what's going on in your life, how I might be able to help you. And again, given what's going on right now, I'm conscious that lots of people are feeling anxious and needing some help, but also recognise that a lot of people have got some financial constraints right now. So I am, if you are interested in doing any work with me for my services, I am offering, if you quote Think Yourself Happy, I am offering a 25% discount on that work for all of for anybody coming in from this webinar. So just quote Think Yourself Happy. and I'm happy to do that. So I hope everybody has really got a lot of value out of this. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. And really, again, thank you to Rick and Glyn. I know you're working hard supporting our colleagues in the NHS and giving up your evening to be here, and obviously all the time you've put into preparing for this as well. So you know, you guys are doing this for free to help everybody out there. So thank you very much, and hope you enjoyed the webinar. Look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.